Secondary teachers, welcome to today's professional development session on engaging learners using knowledge and understanding of neuroscience, specifically teenage brains that are essentially under reconstruction. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which this session is filmed today, the Gubbi Gubbi people. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal people joining us today. My name is Rebecca Stewart and I am a pre-service secondary teacher at Central Queensland University. I'd like to begin the session with this quote from the great Albert Einstein. "The measure of intelligence is the ability to change." You see, even Einstein needed to persevere and practice his craft in order to become one of the greatest minds in human history. He himself relied on the plasticity of his brain to achieve genius status. The Engaging Learners Classroom Management and Neuroscience unit presents us with concepts related to neuroplasticity and the social brain. I became particularly interested in the science behind adolescent brain development and the factors in the learning environment that influence student engagement. I'm here to share this resource with you today in hopes that these insights can assist you in your own knowledge, understandings, and essentially your own classrooms. So in today's session, I'll cover the following key topics: what really happens within the brains of teenagers from a neuroscientific perspective, what internal and external influences contribute to the neuroplastic development of adolescent brains, what effects can these factors have on behaviours, learning and engagement capabilities of teenagers. I will discuss some brain-friendly teaching strategies that you can add to your teacher toolkit. And finally, what does this all look like in a thriving learning environment? So what is going on within the brains of teenagers from a neuroscientific perspective? Well, teenagers are effectively living with a brain that is internally mismatched and heavily under reconstruction, however, not necessarily growth-wise. By the time a child is 6, their brain is 90 to 95% of the size of an adult's brain, and these brains are jam-packed with neurons and synapses. These foundational neural networks have seen children through early childhood, through learning to walk, talk, not to pull on the dog's tail. However, as they get older, they don't require the same networks any longer. Here, the developing brain is ready to really show off its neuroplasticity superpowers through pruning and remodeling so it can function maturely. Unfortunately, this dynamic period of growth and remodeling occurs in different parts of the brain at different times. The region of the brain developed during childhood, the amygdala, gets a CrossFit-style workout in teen brains. It's responsible for hunger, fear, survival, risk-taking, and emotion. So basically, all the fight or flight type responses. The prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for decision-making, impulse control, self-awareness, and learning, takes longer to develop, be pruned, and then remodeled. This mismatch has significant effects on teenagers' cognitive, emotional, and behavioural characteristics. Teenagers need to rely mostly on the amygdala's emotional fight or flight type networks, whilst waiting patiently, or not so patiently, for the prefrontal cortex's planning, self-controlling, learning-ready neural networks to develop and mature. Aside from the organic brain modifications that occur, adolescent neurological development is heavily influenced by internal and external factors, which then often influences their learning engagement. The way in which teenagers think, feel, and spend their time is crucial to the neuroplastic function of developing prefrontal cortex neural networks. Experiences, interests, and activities that teenagers participate in have the ability to reshape and rewire their brains, and these factors can have long-lasting neural advantages or disadvantages. Looking at this slide, all of these hexagons show an internal or external factor that helps or hinders brain development. Getting adequate sleep, exercising and eating well, having hobbies and playing music, enjoying safe, positive relationships, less screen time, and having teachers that use brain-friendly teaching practices all contribute to a healthy brain and thus more ability to stay focused and engaged in classrooms. Alternatively, flipping these factors with a negative spin, so not getting enough sleep, eating poorly, not exercising, experiencing drastic hormonal changes and mental health issues, make focusing and engaging with learning in a classroom extremely challenging. The sensible prefrontal cortex is satisfied and functions well when it does all the wonderful things just mentioned. However, unless it does these things plus more, it becomes dissatisfied and doesn't function well. Many of the impacts of the developing adolescent brain through the standard remodeling process, alongside influences previously mentioned, occur external to the classroom. As secondary teachers, though, when we only have approximately 5 hours per week to spend with each student, we need to make that time really count. We need that time to be meaningful. Having knowledge and understanding of these impacts will assist us in looking out for behavioural, emotional, physical, and cognitive changes in teenagers in order to implement those teaching and learning strategies that best support our students. So, what effects does this development and some of the previously mentioned influences have on teenagers? As you can see, many of these effects are influenced by social change. This is due to the brain being an innately social organ, with studies showing adolescence as a period of significant functional development of the social brain. Negative effects of this developmental stage and possible risk factors are disengagement from learning, behavioural issues, succumbing to peer pressure, taking risks, and experiencing stress and mental health issues, just to name a few. Looking at the graph, you can see the substantial influences peers have on teenagers when playing a virtual driving game. You can see there is a much higher incidence of accidents occurring when teenagers are with friends over when they're driving alone. In contrast, when the brain is healthy and functioning well, and those developmental influences are facilitating positive neuroplastic processes, students experience positive self-esteem, they are focused and engaged while learning, and they have a growth mindset, which is an incredibly important attribute to have as a teenager. Judy Willis explains, as teachers, we are educators. We are in the business of changing brains and building knowledge. Our offices are our classrooms and our students our clients. We need to know what our students' brains need and want for them to learn and gain knowledge. Neuroscience research and subsequent discoveries have provided us many strategies and tools that optimize learning processes for our students, to encourage their motivation, enhance their memory and focus, and for them to actively participate in their education. Essentially, brain-compatible teaching strategies maximize the learning potential of students. A few examples of brain-friendly strategies are: build and value meaningful relationships with your students. Use their names, get to know them, and check in with them regularly. Educate your students on neuroplasticity's role in their learning and ability, and for awareness and insight into their own feelings or behaviours. Use stretch goals. If students aren't pushed or challenged, their brains' neural networks aren't maximised and firing, so challenge them, but know when to pull back without underestimating them. Consistently provide your students with feedback and celebrate their growth and achievements. And remove fear-based learning approaches from your pedagogy. These may get an immediate disciplinary response, however, these encounters often have adverse long-term academic effects on students. Lastly, some ideas as to what an optimal learning environment looks and feels like. These are only a few. There are many more I haven't covered today that to you are undoubtedly meaningful and vital, and I would love to hear them, so please share your ideas. So, a thriving, enriched, brain-friendly classroom encompasses meaningful engagement, knowledge construction, and goal achievement. It provides optimal support, feedback, collaboration. It's a safe space to explore ideas, to be challenged, and to make mistakes. It embraces exploration, curiosity, and questioning, and features quality, meaningful relationships. It encourages movement and play, and most importantly, it is joyful and fun. So I hope the ideas I've raised in this session have provided you with some insight into the adolescent brain and given you ideas and considerations to take away and implement into your own teaching pedagogy and classrooms. That's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and teachers, happy teaching.